Hi, my name's Jim Dougherty, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Community Arts Center in Williamsport, and I'm happy to take you through an introduction to our facility. So right now we're standing in the outer lobby. This building was originally constructed in the late 19th century as the Sterling Hotel. In 1924, the Sterling Hotel burned down, and the site was purchased by the Comerford Theater chain. William Comerford at the time was an industrialist who owned many theaters on the East Coast, and he decided that he was going to build what became the Capitol Theater here as sort of the crown jewel of the Comerford chain. And so in 1928, the theater opened as the Capitol Theater in Williamsport, and at the time it was one of the largest theaters in Pennsylvania. It was originally built as a movie house, not an opera house or a symphonic orchestra place. And so it opened right around the time that talkies first started to come into vogue. It did still have an orchestra pit, and it wasn't uncommon for the films to be accompanied by a live orchestra or a very large pipe organ, which was custom built and one of a kind at the time. So it operated as the Capitol Theater for several years, and then in 1936, there was a major flood in Williamsport, and at the time, Williamsport did not have the existing dike system, flood mitigation system that it has now. So the entire theater, unfortunately, was flooded, and there was a significant damage, as you can imagine. And it was restored and rebuilt, but not to the original grandeur that Comerford had initially invested. And then it operated as the Capitol Theater for about 50 more years, kind of falling further and further into a state of disrepair. And in the late 1980s, there was a contributing partnership between Pennsylvania College of Technology, what is now the First Community Foundation Partnership of Pennsylvania, and the city of Williamsport to undergo a major renovation of the building, which lasted for a few years. And then in 1993, it reopened as the Community Arts Center, which is what it is now. And we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year. The primary design element in the theater is a large octagon in the ceiling of the theater, and as we go through the venue, you'll see that that element is repeated in several places. So here we have the octagon repeated on the floor of the outer lobby in the marble tile. The theater itself was designed with a sort of Mediterranean Basque aesthetic, and as we walk through, you'll see the color schemes and many of the detail elements reflect that theme. So there are coats of arms and griffins and fleur-de-lis and things like that. And as we look up in the ceiling, we look at the pillars, you'll see the same color schemes and sort of sense of ornateness reflected in a way that just doesn't exist in modern theaters anymore. On the outside of the theater, the marquee is actually designed to look like a giant grand piano from end to end. So it's a unique feature. We also have a tall clock tower, which reflects the octagon design. And on the west side of the building, we have an outdoor stage where we allow community groups to perform regularly, and we will host small music concerts and other events like that during the warmer months. Because we're a community-oriented nonprofit venue, we get a ton of support from our local community. So Pennsylvania College of Technology owns the theater, but when the renovation occurred in 1993, there were multiple contributing businesses as well as a lot of local citizens who contributed funds and continue to support us annually every year. And throughout the venue, you'll see plaques and recognition of those people and organizations, and we're always very thankful for their support. We wouldn't be able to continue doing what we do without them. So in the inner lobby, you can really see the Basque Art Deco style. The color scheme is reflective of that sort of Spanish influence. When this lobby existed as part of the Capitol Theater, the back wall was only a half wall, and the concession stand was in this space, so folks who were coming in to see shows could go and get popcorn or candy and would still be able to see the theater screen from the lobby. When it was renovated in 1993, that wall was extended to be a full wall going all the way up to the mezzanine and balcony area. And as you look around in that space, you'll see the intricacy and the very ornate furnishings, the fleur-de-lis, the coats of arms that are there. And all of those elements were meticulously handcrafted and then restored by hand in 1993. And it's a really impressive piece of architectural work. The hand-painted ceiling is particularly impressive. It was all done via scaffold, and as you can imagine, keeping it looking nice can be a bit of a challenge. It's a little bit like owning a very old Victorian home in that something always needs to be restored or updated, and that's where the community support is instrumental in keeping the Community Arts Center the beautiful jewel that it is. As you look around in the space, pay close attention to that level of detail, and I like to remind all of the visitors here that all of that work was done by hand, and it is increasingly a lost art. There are very few people who are qualified to create or restore this kind of work in the United States anymore. So I'm standing in the inner lobby of the Community Arts Center now, and because we are an active theater, there's actually a rehearsal taking place right now, so I'm going to try to keep my voice a little low. But one of the things to note in here is the awe-inspiring architecture, and whenever someone walks into this space or into the theater space, it's not at all uncommon to hear them gasp and see their eyes go wide as they look around at the artistry in this space. Behind me on the stairs, you can probably see the carpet. The carpet is actually the original design from the Capitol Theater as it was installed in 1928. Interestingly, there's an anecdote that I was told by the contractors who renovated this space in 1993. For the longest time while the Capitol Theater was open, you were still allowed to smoke indoors, and so most of the artistry and the color schemes were covered by a layer of dirt and grime and smoke that had accumulated over the years, and they weren't sure what the carpet was really supposed to look like. One day while they were moving furniture underneath a filing cabinet in an office, they discovered a pristine swatch of the original carpet that happened to have the manufacturer's name on the back. And the manufacturer was still in business, so they were able to contact them and get this carpet design, and the carpet that they installed in 1993 matches perfectly the original carpet from the Capitol Theater. In 1936, there was a major flood in Williamsport that brought 6 to 8 feet of water into the theater, unfortunately, and it did damage much of the lower lying areas of the theater. Luckily, though, the ceiling and the higher elements like those that we see here were preserved, and these were used as inspiration and as templates and guidelines for the 1993 renovation to restore the rest of the ceiling work throughout the venue. And you can really see the sense of color and detail in the architectural elements in this space. So scattered throughout the venue, we have sort of different walls of fame featuring photos and autographed memorabilia from performers who have played here over the years. We've hosted some incredibly talented, globally famous worldwide performers: Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, Willie Nelson, Jerry Seinfeld, rock bands like ZZ Top, Styx, Toto, Ringo Starr has played here, and we continue to have shows that really are incredible for an area this size. I'm standing now in the Capitol Lounge, which is the venue's bar and meeting space. During big shows in the theater, this space is open before the show and during intermission, and then after the show. And when we don't have theater shows, we will use this venue space as its own space. And as you can imagine, in a city the size of Williamsport, sometimes it can be challenging to fill a 2,000-seat theater, but this room can hold anywhere from 60 to 150 people, so we use it a lot for community events. We do events every month where we will bring in touring stand-up comedians and do a comedy series. We also do a monthly series called Tunes on Tap, where we have a happy hour where we host a local band and a local brewery, and those are free and open to the public. We try not to do too many things in this space because part of our mission as the CAC is to not compete with downtown Williamsport businesses, but rather to bring business to those spaces. So we don't do too many events in here because we don't want to pull people out of the downtown bars and restaurants in Williamsport. So I'm here behind the bar in the Capitol Lounge. This is a fully stocked bar that we do operate every night when we have shows. And we do other shows in here that are bar specific as well. It's great during the warmer months because we have a very nice deck that overlooks downtown Williamsport. It's a great place to gather and either catch a show or just get together with friends. The space itself has lighting that can be fully controlled. It can change color, and we can create some really interesting effects in here. We've done themed dinners in here for Valentine's Day. and St. Patrick's Day and those types of things. And this is also an amenity that our donors often take advantage of. They can reserve tables in here before shows, and our bartenders always have their favorite drinks ready, which is nice. When the theater was originally restored in 1993, this was actually a members-only private lounge, available only to donors who gave money at a significant level. And then in 2012, it was opened up to the public as part of the rest of the venue. And so a lot of folks don't really know that it's up here. It's kind of a hidden gem that we really like to make people aware of if it's their first time visiting the CAC. I'm standing now on the balcony of the William J. Martin Theater. We are an active theater, so that you can see that there's a production happening behind me that's in rehearsal. One of the things that I want to point out here is the octagon design element, which graces the center of the theater. It's a very large octagon with multiple smaller octagons inside of it, and it has existed since 1928 when the theater was built. It was all meticulously restored as part of the 1993 restoration, and it's 5 stories above the ground, so as you can imagine, it's pretty challenging when it needs to have repair work done. This part of the theater was not affected by the flood of 1936 because it was above the water line. So the seats up here, while they were installed new in 1993, they were built to the original 1928 specifications, and they feature the colorful scrollwork on the sides of the seats that would have originally been in the Capitol Theater when it was built in 1928. I'm standing in front of one of a pair of unique murals, which are part of the Community Arts Center's decor. The one behind me is the east side, and interestingly, these murals actually represent geographically the sun rising and setting on the Susquehanna Valley. So the one behind me is the sun rising, and the one opposite me is the sun setting. And they are original to the building. They were painted as part of the 1928 building of the Capitol Theater. They were lost to time at some point and covered behind layers of smoke and dirt. And during the 1993 restoration, they were discovered, and when they cleaned them off and discovered what they were, they hired a professional art restorer to come in and restore them to their original color. So they're pretty spectacular. The view from the stage is arguably the best view in the building. You can see behind me all 2,200 seats arrayed, and if you use your imagination, you can think about what they would be like if they were full of people and flashing lights and smoke and music. It's a really incredible place to be. We are very thrilled to bring local talent in here. It is sort of the culmination of many of our local students' performance career here in Williamsport, and to be able to share the stage with some of the incredible talent nationally and globally that's been here is a really special treat for residents of the Williamsport area. When the theater was built in 1928, many films still had live soundtrack accompaniment, and here in the theater they would either do that via an orchestra in the pit below the stage or a custom-built pipe organ that was unfortunately lost in the 1936 flood. But you can still see the cutouts where the pipes for that organ would have been. It was a unique, one-of-a-kind organ that was specifically purpose-built for this venue. So this is a peek behind the curtain here on stage. Behind me you can see the rigging and all of the controls for the curtains and the lights. All of this stuff is, for the most part, still manually controlled. Some of the larger shows will bring in motorized equipment, but for most shows we still do all of this stuff manually with CAC stage crew, who are an excellent group. I'm standing now on the pit. The pit is unique for the Community Arts Center in that it is a large hydraulic motorized elevator. It actually has 3 separate settings. Right now it's at its middle setting, which is below the level of the stage. At its highest setting, it's level with the stage, and you can see behind me the cutout where the pit fits in. At its highest level, it just expands the size of the stage for larger productions. It can also be submerged below floor level if we want pit musicians or orchestra to be out of sight for a particular performance. We recently finished a restoration of the ceiling in the rear of the theater. Wear and tear over the past 30 years and condensation and moisture created a situation where pieces of the ceiling were flaking off. Because the paint scheme is not a normal paint scheme, it requires very specific skills in order to blend the paint. And you can see that they did a fantastic job, but there's no way to match paint that's 30 years old with paint that is brand new. So over time, the distinction between the two colors will diminish and it will look more natural. But for now, it's very obvious where the restoration took place. Thanks for joining us today here at the Community Arts Center. I hope that we can see you in person at some point. We have a lot of great events and performances coming up through the fall and the spring, and we do a lot of community events in here as well. So I encourage you to come and visit us here in downtown Williamsport and see the crown jewel for yourself. If you'd like more information about the Community Arts Center, you can find information about our history and all of our upcoming shows on our website, caclive.com.